Welcome to this beautiful and awesome lesson, guys. In this episode, we are looking at variables. All right, so variables are the most essential and the most fundamental in programming. Okay, so variables help us to store data, and also it helps us in doing some functionalities like calculations and all those things in programming. Okay, so you cannot actually build a project without a variable because no matter how big or the small that project will look like, you still need a variable to store that data and be able to do this calculations and this arithmetic operations and all. So we cannot do without variable. It is very, very important and essential. Like I said before, give it much attention as we're moving on. All right, so if you're ready, let's dive in. All right, so what we're going to do in this episode is that we are going to create a variable that is used for an arithmetic operations. Okay, so what I mean by arithmetic operations that it simply means what to do calculations. Okay, which means addition, subtraction, or whatsoever. Okay, so let's say we are building a database that can calculate all the ages of the students in the class. Okay, so something like this. Okay, so we use an arithmetic operations or we use calculations to do that. In simple put, you're going to build a variable that use calculations. Okay, okay, so let's clear everything out from our previous lesson. Now we are going to use three data types, okay, which is integer, float, and double. All right, so forget about the terminologies if you are total beginner. Okay, just follow the proceedings. You are good to go. You understand everything perfectly as we are progressing. All right, so we are going to use an integer, which is an int. We are going to use float, and also we are going to use double. Okay, so something like this. All right. Now I'm going to comment it out. Now, what is comment? Comment are your friends in programming. When you are using comments, the compiler does not read the code. Simple as that. Okay, so any code that is written here and you comment them out, the compiler does not read it. Whenever you see the code, it jumps to the next line. Okay, so how to comment a code in C++? You can just do your double / and you are good to go. Okay, all right. It is just for the readability of the code. Okay, it helps the readability of the code. It's there for the programmer to see, but the compiler will not read it. All right. Now let's move on. All right. So now let's write some variables. So remember, I said we are using int. Okay, which is an integer. Okay, int simply means an integer. Okay. So now this integer. Now we are going to give it anything like age. Okay. So age. So we said int age. So int age simply means that we are creating a variable which is called age. But now we have not stored any data in this age. So now the next step is that we're going to store a data in the age. So we'll call the age here. Then we said we give it an assignment operator, which is equal to, then we said 20. Okay. So when you do int age equals 20, now this age, whenever you see this age, now it is 20. Okay. So because we have assigned 20 to this age. Okay. So for instance, if you come here, then we do count, then we do age, then let's end the line. So when we do something like this and run the code, we are going to get 20. Okay, let's run the code and see. Like I said, I'm not going to run the code inside here, but as a code block user, you have to run the code inside here. Okay, I'm sending the code in here and run it. So I'll run the code, and all things be equal, I have my 20 here. Okay, just like that. Okay, so one thing I would like to understand is that don't put the age inside a quotation. Okay, for instance, you run the code like this, int age. Okay, if you run the code like this, let's say for instance, you put it in a quotation like this and run it, we are going to get age. You are not going to get the 20. Okay, you can see. Okay, because now it's going to see it as a string. It's not going to see it as a variable. Okay, so we run it like this, not in a quotation. Okay, we are dealing with an integer. Okay, so now integers ends, which is an integer, it can hold any number at all. Okay, so for instance, you can change it to anything at all. Say if you make it 200 and run it, you get your 200. So now we have installed 200 inside the age. So now the age now is 200. Get it like this. Okay, please get it like this and let's move on. All right, so one thing I would like you to understand before you move on is that we have a declaration and initialization. Okay, so what is declaration and what is initialization? Now we can see the line of code right here. We can see that int age, this one is what? A declaration. Okay, we just declare the variable, but we've not initialized it. Okay, so when we come here to say age equal 20, this is where now we have assigned a value, okay, to the variable, which is the age. So now we have initialized it. So there's a possibility that we can declare your variable without initializing. For instance, when we run this one, and you can see we did not assign any value to it, but it is giving us what, 1. So in some cases, it can also give you 0. It could be 0 or 1. Okay, as you understand, computer understands zeros and ones. So it is good to initialize your variable wherever you declare it. After declaration, you initialize it. Okay. All right. So now the next question to ask is that, what if our height is maybe 90.9, which is a decimal, not a whole number? Okay. What will happen if we print this one on the screen? Let's run the code. And here you can see that with the height, we still have 90. We did not get the 9. Okay. So what is actually the reason? So the reason being is that integer variables, they only store whole numbers, not a decimal numbers. Okay. It only store a whole numbers, not a decimal numbers. So what do you do when you want to work around a whole number? So if you want to work around a whole number, then we move on to the next line, which is what, our float. You use float instead of ints. Okay. So for instance, we do what, float, yeah, something like this, float. Then maybe we can change this one to maybe 50.5. When you run the code now, we can see that now we have our positive response. Okay, 50.5 and 90.9. All right. If you are going for an integer, then you are going for a whole number. And if you are going a decimal, then you are going for a float. So you can see that when I change it here, I change it to an integer variable. Now I can give my 50 as expected. All right, now let's move on to the last line, which is the double. Okay, so now let's demonstrate it first. You understand it better in this dimension. So doubled, okay. So we write the doubled against what's the decimal numbers. So now let's print it and see. When we run the code, we have the same result. Okay. So what if we apply it also to the whole number? We're supposed to use an integer. What will happen? And we are good to go. Okay, we have the same thing. Okay, so as the name implies, the double, in a way, it can hold the integer and the float at the same time. Okay, it can hold the whole numbers and the decimal numbers at the same time. Okay, on more advanced notice, if we're going for a whole number, use int. If we're going for a float, we can go ahead and use a decimal. So as a beginner, in order for you not to get confused. Okay. All right, guys, welcome back to this episode. We are still on data types and variables. Okay, so on our previous lesson, we were able to understand what is an integer variable, what is a float variable, and doubled. Okay, we are taking a step further, and in this episode, we are going to understand the rest of the data types in context with the variable. Okay, we'll be looking at the string variable and the char. Okay, and also we have the boolean. Okay, so something like this. Okay, so we have the string and we have the char and we have the boolean. By then, we are not going to use the boolean for now, but definitely we will be using it later. Okay, but in this episode, I'm not going to talk about boolean, but we are definitely going to handle the string variable and the char. Okay, we are going to understand it better. So now, to begin with, let's create a string variable. And let's see the reason why it is important to use. Even without a string, we can still create a variable and it will function better. Okay, actually, we can write a string without using a variable. Okay, so now let's compare the two and see the importance of using a string variable and only writing a string without a variable. Okay, so now we are going to write a string of a name without a variable. Okay, so what we do is we only have to do the cout, then we do the value that you want to put inside. So it could be a name. Okay, so let's say Joseph Asante. Okay, then we will end it here like this. Okay, now when we print this one on the screen, we are going to get Joseph Asante as usual. Okay, all right. Now what if you want this one maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, 50? Are you going to repeatedly type in Joseph Asante, Joseph Asante, Joseph Asante 20 times or 100 times? What if it's a million times? Okay, so this is where the string variable steps in to make the work easier. Okay, so in the same manner that we created this one, so we can convert it to a string variable. So to begin with, we start with what, a string. Okay, so we say a string, then we do name. Okay, so what is the name? Let's assign a value to the name. Then we say what, Joseph Asante. Remember, I'm going by what the assignment and the declaration at a go. Okay, so on the previous lesson, we understood the two. Okay, let's do the assignment and the declaration one more time, then we will proceed from there. So now the string, then we are using what string data type that we're using is what, name like this. So now we can declare it. Okay, we can make the declaration by doing what, the name, then we assign a value to the name, which is a string, and we can do what Joseph Asante. Okay, so something like this. Okay, so it is pretty much the same. So now, if you want to print it on the screen, we don't need this one. We only need what? We only need name. Good, good. We only need name, and we are good to go. Okay, we only need the name like this, and we are good to go. Okay, so now, let me send it to my code and go and print it. So you can print it on your screen and see the results. Okay, so when I come here and run my code, sorry, I did not end this one. Always end. Remember to end your code with a semicolon. All right. So when I run the code, we can see that we have Joseph Asante here printed out here for us successfully. Okay, it's in the same method. Okay, so this is the longhand. Okay, so that we declare it, then we assign it. Okay, declaration and assignment. Okay, now let's write this on a shorthand. You assign the name, the string variable to it at a go. So here we will do what Joseph and Asante. Okay, so something like this. The spacing, it doesn't matter. Okay, you can leave any space, it doesn't really matter. Okay, let's run the code one more time and we have the results. Always remember to end your code, okay, with a semicolon. Okay, so and we are able to go. Now, what a string is? A string is any word in the quotation. The words in the quotation is a string. It can be millions of words in the quotation. They are all strings. Okay, let's say we have a full statement, a long hand statement, anything. It could be anything. A long statement, we can put them on one variable, as you are seeing here. And just for the data, okay, we just make it name. Okay, so we only have to print it and we are good to go. So when we run the code, we can see we have it here. Now, the importance of string variable is that if I want to print this one maybe 10 times, 5 times, 15 times, I only have to come here, copy this one, and paste it the numbers of time that I wanted. That is all. So when I paste it the numbers of time that I wanted and run the code, I'm actually going to get the results. And we can see we have it printed out the numbers of time that I wanted. So that is that. So in variable, we store the code for us for a future use. All right, so now let's see and understand how the char also works. Okay, so let's create a char variable. So we do a char. Now we can put in anything, only z. Okay, so I'll put something like this, only z. Okay, so now I'll assign a value to it. The rules of using the char is that you use a single quote. Okay, you use a single quote. Then I type here maybe z. It could be small letter or it could be capital. So when I come here and print out only z, for instance, now let's run the code and see what we get. And we are getting what we are getting is what? Z. All right, so the char is used to print a single alphabet. A single alphabet. Okay, so for instance, if I put in a word like God is good and run it like this, what am I going to get? Definitely, I'm going to get the last word, which is what? The D. Okay, now I put God is good and leave a space like this. There's a space after. So when I run it, I don't get anything because what? It reads the last one. So that is a char for you. So when I make the good capital G, it's going to print only the capital G. Yes, it's going to, okay. That is that for the char. When I make it Z, as we stated before, it's going to print the Z. And remember, it is always in a single quotation. It's not in a double quotation. All right, so I might say that it is not only alphabet that you can print out. You can also print out numbers as well. For instance, when I put 9 here and you run it, you are going to get your result as 9. Okay, but in technicality, this 9 is not a number. When I say it is not a number, even you are seeing number 9, but it is not a number. It cannot be used for calculation. Okay, when you use it for calculation, it will not work. Okay, it is there for only readability. You need a float or double. Okay, remember that. So for instance, let's say we are using a string variable of anything. We say number or numbers. A string variable of numbers. Then we assign it to 60. Okay. When you print this one on the screen, we are going to get your result. All right. So when I call number, for instance, and run the code, okay, please always remember to end your code. Okay. So when you run a code like this, you can see that we have 90 and 60. Okay. But this is the that you are seeing, even though it is 60, but you cannot use it to do any calculations. Okay. So take note of that. All right. All right. So the very last thing that I'd like to talk about before we end this episode is that C++ is case sensitive. When I say it is case sensitive, it means that when you're using small letters, we're using small letters. When you're using capital, use capital. Okay. So for instance, if I start this only, okay, so this only, when I make the first one capital and run the code, I'm going to get an error. Okay, you can see that I got an error. If you are going by this, then you have to do it this way and you are good to go. And if you are going by all capitals, you can go by all capitals. If you are using the camel casing, you can go by camel casing, okay, but don't mix them around. So that will be all for now, but I have an assignment for you, okay? This is your assignment. Finish it and submit it as much as possible. Okay, so you create a variables that contain all the data types such as int, float, doubled, strings, and char. Okay, so we're going to create an integer that contains all these data types. Okay, so for instance, it's going to be, if you are creating an int, you can do int age equals, then you come and create the fruit variable, then you create a double variable, then you create a string, then you create a char. Okay, then after that, you get the code running successfully. Okay, you make sure you run the code and it's working successfully. Then you give me a screenshot in accordance with the code. Then you send it for an assessment. All right. Okay, so that'll be all for now. Let's meet on the next one and learn more.